About the
We're talking up to the 19th chapter. We're talking about the triumph of the the Christ over the low the lower personality and those forces which are deceptive and try to keep the spirit of mankind imprisoned. And then it says this. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought the miracles before him, with which he deceived them which had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Ooh.
So that sounds pretty terrifying. And this is kind of a verse that the Christian world is used to scare the dickens out of everybody about burning in hell. When we talk about burning in hell, they're often thinking of this verse. The one thing that's different, though, it says the beast and the false prophet were cast alive into this um, um,
Bottomless pit.
cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. So they didn't die and go to hell, but they were alive and in this lake of fire. So what does this mean? First of all, the word fire comes from the Greek word pure, which can be translated as fire, fiery, or lightning. The word indicates a display of light and is a symbol of enlightenment. Now, to burn is fairly accurate translation from KIO, which means to set on fire or to consume. But brimstone is a particularly interesting word. It comes from the word theion, which is the neuter of theios, which in turn comes from theos. Anyone know how theos is translated in the Bible, in the New Testament? What word is that translated as?
Well, like theosophy, it's the study of God, so theos would be God.
Right, theos is the Greek word for God. Okay, so and brimstone comes from this word, which is pretty interesting. So John is telling us here that the beast and the false prophet are to be cast in a situation where they encounter fire or enlightenment. That's disciples filled with light and love that they will encounter, burning with brimstone or the God within. So the beast and the false prophet are going to be cast into a situation where they're going to have enlightenment thrust upon them by disciples that have the theos or the brimstone or the fire of God burning within them. And so they will be unable to perform their deception any longer because of the enlightenment of the disciples of the world. So the inner light will replace the outer, and eventually in all, for it's Jesus give us these words in Matthew. He says, even so, it is not the will of the Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Okay, so in the end, not one single one of us will perish. Everyone will eventually achieve enlightenment.
Even Ed?
Yeah, even Ed, even me. So the ones that are most difficult, of course, are the ones that take the left-hand path but even they will eventually make a turnaround. They'll begin their progression all over again, and eventually they too will achieve enlightenment and return to their source. But everybody eventually does. Some just take a lot longer than others because of detours. But sooner or later, we develop the intelligence to recognize which path is the best one to take. So it says, it speaks here of the beast was thrown into the lake of fire. The beast represents the unearned authorities of the world that say, you must do what I say because I am special, I am an authority. I have been appointed over you, so do as I say. And or believe what I say. I am the one that can tell you what the Bible really means, so or what God really wants. So this type of outer authority is thrown into the lake of fire. In other words, the enlightenment of the people is strong enough that this outward authority is seen as not legitimate unless it's verified by the inner authority, the inner God, that theos, that brimstone that is within the disciples will overcome the outer authorities of the beast. So if somebody says you have to believe it because the authorities say so, you say, well, the authorities must agree with the inner confirmation from the soul, and unless it agrees with that, they have no power. So
Well, then you're a rebel.
the inner confirmation of the soul is uh, the lake of fire that destroys the beast. But it talks about the false prophet or the false prophets. Who's the false prophet?
They're the ones that go forth and teach the doctrines of the beast.
Exactly. You must have read the book.
Well, I know what a false teacher would do, and well, I always like to prepare for class, Brother Joe. But and they're found in, all through the world. You'll see them in science, religion, um, business. They're teaching the doctrines of
Yeah,
the
we were earlier talking about the Big Bang and how the James Webb Telescope and new observations are indicating the universe is a lot older than they thought. Yet the and now in the past, if anyone uh, gives some theory that's in opposition to the regular Big Bang and the age of the universe, they don't get any funding. They're ostracized. Other scientists attack them, and so on. And this happens not only with this, but in anything. You go against the establishment and you get attacked. The the false prophets are the ones that support established outer authorities. So they keep this authority in place by intellectualizing it to the extent that they can explain it so it sounds logical, but there's a lot of distortion. And have you noticed, say, you see two people arguing on a TV program, both of them, maybe both of them in error, but one of them is definitely in error. Only one can be right. If 2 + 2 only equals 4. But when you listen to both of them, the guy that you can see that maybe you see that one guy is in error, but you listen to him explain why he thinks he's right. It sounds like a pretty good argument. And so they're able to do this. These false prophets make really good sounding arguments as to why we need to support the beast. And they sound just, sometimes they will sound really good, and the only people that can see the flaws are people with some some soul contact. They can sense there's something wrong with that argument. Let me think on that. Um, Now, the it talks about the miracles being held by the powers that be, and the miracles in modern medicine and so forth. They are all controlled by powerful authorities, and if you go against them, then you're attacked. For instance, people come up with legitimate ways that cancer can be treated that doesn't cost hardly any money. And when somebody even mentions that they have something that can help with cancer that's not authorized by the medical society, they are attacked. And these attackers are the false prophets. Now, there's a lot of things in medicine, for instance, that are good and legitimate. But when when something is legitimately established as being good and workable, the false prophets take control of it and make everything rigid, and you can't go outside of it. You can't progress beyond it. And there's several instances of people that tried to progress beyond it. One was William Reich, and he was a German guy that invented an ozone. What was it? Not ozone. A machine that you get in that brings in like etheric energy, and he started healing a lot of people, and that was back in the 30s, and he was very intelligent. He associated with Einstein, and Einstein thought he was onto some good stuff. And the authorities become really alarmed because he was curing a lot of diseases with his uh, oh, can't remember the word, machine, some type of accumulator of energy. And so what they did, they raided his laboratory. They took all of his notes, all of his books, all of his manuals that he had spent a lot of time accumulating, and burned them. And they destroyed his machinery, and they put him in prison, and he died there a short time later. And people have tried to duplicate his it's Orgon Energy. That's what it's called. And it was Orgon Accumulator was his machine that he made.
In argon, A-R,
Orgon, Orgon.
Oregon.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so he they burned everything they could find, and so people have tried to replicate it. Some claim that they've had, but nobody seems to have had the success that he had. He healed quite a few people, and that really alarmed the powers that be in the medical society. And so they forced the government to come in and close him down. But what was interesting, they didn't just close him down; they just burned everything, so nobody could get access to the knowledge that he had.
Well, that's what happened. That's what they did with the Alexandrian library too. They burned it.
Oh yeah, that's for the powers. The powers that be do not like to be challenged, and if you challenge them, they will come after you full steam. Another guy was a Hungarian guy back in the 1800s named Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician, and he was he was concerned about in the mortality rate of in delivering babies there, that the mortality rate was 18% of the mothers that were delivering babies died. And he come up with the idea that, well, maybe washing hands would help. So he had everybody in his under his authority start washing their hands before they delivered any babies, and the mortality rate dropped from 18% to less than 2%. And now this was a solid scientific figure. And then he started advising other physicians to wash their hands, and they said, why? Well, there seems to be some invisible things that's on our hands that we don't know about. We can't see it, but there's something there. And they say, well, that's crazy. There's no little lives on your hands that you can't see. That's stupid. So they attacked him, and they eventually put him in a mental hospital, and he died there. He was beaten by the guards, and amazingly, he died of an infection.
The guards didn't wash their hands.
Yeah, well, I guess after they beat him, and then they started treating him with unwashed hands, and he died. Poor guy died of an infection. And then it was just a short time after that that Louis Pasteur discovered there were these little tiny things on the hands called germs. And when that became public knowledge, everybody started washing their hands, and mortality rates went down. But the poor guy was not able to live to see the success of what he taught. But he was attacked, even though he had the solid proof. The mortality rate dropped from 18% to 2%. And he could tell them that, but because they said, well, we can't see those little germs, so they don't exist. And so they attacked him. And that would have meant that all the doctors in the world would have to start washing their hands and changing their ways. And people just don't want to change their ways. When you say, hey, we have to change things, people always resist. Even a simple thing like washing hands. And it's an amazing story. But
Well, that's where enlightenment overrode the darkness of the beast, because they couldn't deny it any longer.
yeah, but then when things do get established, now if anyone comes up with, hey, don't wash your hands, well, then they'll be persecuted. It's just the opposite once things get established. So it talks about the miracles the false prophet had was able to do in the side of the beast, and some of these miracles are things like heart and organ transplant, radiation treatments. This is just in medicine alone. Miracle drugs, surgery, numerous other procedures, and we have the miracle of the automobile, airplanes, and rockets, all kinds of miracles that the beast and the false prophets try to take full credit for and control. And they want credit for all the miracles of technology. The beast wants to have full power over these miracles. So the false prophet and the beast have power to do miracles, but they want complete control. And if you go outside of their control and try to create new miracles on a higher level, then you will be attacked. And this will come to an end on a personal level and also on a worldwide level when the disciples uh, radiate enough intelligence to dispel this power of the outer authority that things must be verified from within. Even though, say, the scientific establishment say they say you may need a heart transplant, or you may, well, let's say with cancer treatment, they say you need to have this radiation treatment or you will die. Okay, but suppose your soul tells you, no, there's another way. I have a revelation of another process where I can be healed. and you will be attacked for it, even though you may be right. And there are many people that have been in this circumstance that have looked for alternative treatments that were not so destructive that have been healed. And they have ignored the power of the beast and went by inner guidance and did receive healings. And you hear all kinds of stories about that happening with medicine. But this happens in all types of endeavors. It's the those following the inner guidance against those who maintain authority by the outer authorities telling us what is right and wrong. And and here it's talking about a time in the future when the inner authorities will begin to dominate the outer authorities. And we'll go from there. It says, and the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat on the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. It seems out of sync here with, I think we talked about that last week. So anyway, the power of the outer authorities are stripped of their flesh or stripped of their power. So they have no more power to have life and movement and control, and the inner authority prevails. Okay, any comment on that before we move to chapter 20? Chapter 20.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say on uh, when the COVID thing first came out and everybody was getting inoculated, there was something that said to me, "Don't do that." And so I never got a shot for COVID. And boy, did I catch hell. I caught it from my family, friends, um, the guy in a grocery store, because I wasn't wearing a mask at a time when it was optional. He says, "You don't care about people, do you?" And he picked up a loaf of bread and threw it at me. Well,
Yeah,
I caught it. I caught it and tossed it back.
yeah, I didn't get the shot either, and Artie and I didn't. And yeah, we got a lot of flack from family on that. It's just amazing. Uh,
I just acted like, there was no COVID, and I never got COVID.
yeah. I got it, but it was like uh, cold for me and Artie. We didn't have much problem with it.
Hmm.
So at least we're immune now. But people, the studies are now showing that people that have long COVID, almost all of them have been vaccinated. And the people that got COVID that were not vaccinated are not suffering the long COVID so much. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, chapter 20 begins with, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Okay, the angel represents a spiritual messenger or message that the disciple or the disciples uh, have, and heaven represents higher consciousness. So this one represents tells us that at this point in time, when the beast and the false prophet are being controlled by higher authority, this will bring down a great revelation uh, that will give us, the disciples of the world, the key to the bottomless pit, having a great chain in our hand to seal this pit. And this goes along with a prophecy from Daniel. And the prophecy from Daniel says this, and I beheld the same horn. And when Daniel talks about the horn, it's the same as the beast in the Revelation. So, in other words, I beheld this beast. He made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possess the kingdom. Okay, this is basically saying the same thing as the beast and the false prophet being thrown into the lake of fire. And that lake of fire is composed of enlightenment from disciples that destroys the power of the beast and the false prophets that enforce the words of the beast. So the power is taken from the beast, but it says the Ancient of Days will will provide the power. Now, the Ancient of Days is the same as Sinet Kimura in the esoteric writings, and he works through the first ray energy, which is the energy of power, representing the power of God. So for all these years, the disciples have been working with enlightenment and love, and they still have not prevailed. They need one more ingredient to prevail, and that's power.
Power.
Power from on high. And how that power from on high will come will be an involvement of the Ancient of Days, and he will supply it in some way that is not detailed. He will either overshadow a disciple or a group of disciples and lend his power to them. And he may also make some appearances, perhaps in vision or to groups in some way or another. But he will lend his intelligence and power so that love enlightenment can actually prevail. Because love and enlightenment isn't enough to prevail completely on their own. They need a additional uh, source of power to prevail over the powers of the Antichrist. Because the powers of the Antichrist or have been so powerful throughout the history of the world as we know it that the saints, the enlightened people have never been able to prevail for any length of time to speak of. It's like in the days of Jesus, there was a display of power through his resurrection, and it stimulated a tremendous movement. But still, they were prevailed over by the Roman authorities, got control of the church and control of the teachings. So they were the churches of the world that developed were under the control of outer authorities rather than the inner.
So love
JJ.
wisdom wasn't quite enough. That's
And
second.
aren't you using the Ancient of Days as the Christ, and it's kind of synonymous there in that what you just said?
No, uh, the ancient of days. It's Daniel was speaking of the ancient of days. He also mentioned one likened to the Son of Man, which would have been the Christ figure. But the Christ represents the love energy,
Right.
and the Ancient of Days represents the power. So we need the power. The Ancient of Days will step in and lend the disciples of the world, give them enough power so that they can overcome the beast. And
JJ, are you talking about a time simultaneous to the reappearance of the Christ, or something far in the future where the Ancient of Days makes his presence manifest?
No, it will be around the reappearance of the Christ. The reappearance of the Christ will also involve participation of the Ancient of Days to some extent. He will not be here in person, but he will lend his power, and the power of God will be manifested to a degree that peace on earth can actually be established, and the rulers will be enlightened.
So is that overshadowing most likely to happen through the Christ? The Christ will be influenced or overshadowed by the Ancient of Days?
Yeah, he'll work with the Christ in some way. Uh, the Christ will definitely be in touch with him, as well as disciples uh, and groups will be able to tap into the power. Now, the Shambhala energy was released before World War II, and it was picked up by Hitler instead of the disciples. And look how much power that Hitler had. And this release of this power energy is uh, power itself. Raw power is neutral, and unfortunately, Hitler picked that up. And Germany only had 60 million people compared to billions throughout the world, and he challenged the whole world with an amazingly small number of people and resources. Because of that tremendous power he was able to pick up. And the next round, it's going to be the disciples that pick up this power that will be intelligently transmitted through the Ancient of Days.
He
Okay.
talks a lot about in the seventh ray cycle that we're going into will introduce a lot of first ray energy. And some of the other avatars, like the avatar of synthesis and the rider from the secret place, and all kinds of other avatars will, in the externalization of the hierarchy, will participate in this involvement with first ray energy and
Yeah,
stimulating the masses. Talks.
I have a question, JJ.
sure.
Why was it Hitler that picked it up back then? And what is different now to ensure that instead it will be the workers of light that picks it up?
Well, when Shambhala energy is released, it's neutral, and from Shambhala, uh, they try to release it during a cycle that the disciples will be the most likely ones to pick it up. And unfortunately, Hitler picked it up first. And so the disciples, even though some of them picked up some of it, it wasn't enough because Hitler got the advantage on them. So the next time it's released in that amount, it's been small packages have been released off and on since, but a big release is waiting to come, and that we believe will be picked up by the disciples rather than the Antichrist energies again. But Hitler just picked it up because he was in tune. He was he was seeking great power, and his mind was on power, and he just happened to be one to pick it up and go and run with it. But it could have happened to anybody on the planet that was in the consciousness that Hitler was in, or any negative person.
So you just hope that this time, or there's greater hope that this time, instead, it will be picked up by the workers of light. There's nothing that's really changed,
Yeah, well,
per se.
we've kind of at a crossroads we've been as to whether or not we're going to have a World War III or not.
Right.
And what needs to happen is that some type of peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, because if we continue, it's not going to get any better. we provoke Russia, and once they're provoked enough, Putin has made it clear he will use atomic weapons if he's cornered enough. And he keeps telling us he's not joking. He's serious, and so. And I believe that's the case. I think if this continues, it could lead to an atomic exchange. It needs to be diffused, and a compromise needs to be reached. And there's a lot of people that are against any compromise whatsoever. And if there's no compromise, then eventually it could lead to a nuclear exchange. And so that's where the danger of the destructive Shambhala energies is leading us into World War III. And if we can avoid that and make some type of compromise there, we can then pave the way for the Shambhala energy to be on the forces of light so that the new age can come in. And karma is on our side because Hitler had the advantage last time. So cause and effect should give the forces of light the advantage this time to take full control of the Shambhala energy and seal the forces of evil. And then, as the next verse prophesies, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. The dragon represents the lower ego, or the power of the lower emotions. And so what the forces of light will do will be to give enough enlightenment to the planet that people will see that the ego and the lower emotions need to be controlled, and we need to not be ruled by the lower emotions, but we need to be ruled by light and truth and purity of thought, rather than just reacting emotionally to every situation. And
That's what we just studied last Thursday, Joe, was how disciples need to overcome the control of their emotional bodies and raise their consciousness up into more of service.
Yeah.
Anyway, kind of on track there. But there are a lot of groups out there that are raising consciousness, hundreds and hundreds of them. So I think
there's more and more people surfacing. They all have some things that are true, some not, but there's more and more focused on peace on earth rather than war. And so we're having a sharp division among humanity, that people that want to fight tooth and nail to preserve their the status quo, and people that want to go into greater freedom and light and peace and live and let live attitude. And next it says, and this angel cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. So in other words, what will happen is the disciples will receive enough enlightenment that enlightenment by itself, accompanied by tuning into the power of God, will suppress the power of the ego and the lower emotions. And what will put a seal on these lower energies will be the enlightenment of the people themselves. Now, it says 1,000 years. may not be exactly 1,000 years, but in other words, it's telling us it's going to be pretty long period of time that the powers of the Antichrist will be suppressed so that they will not be able to dominate. So people will look for truth within and have it verified from within rather than from without. And this will seal the power of the Antichrist. So he will the people will no longer look without for truth, but they will look without. Maybe they still will look without, but they will always verify from within. They will be taught this. This will be taught until the teaching will prevail, and it will put a seal on dragon and uh, the Antichrist forces.
Well, doesn't the seventh ray, doesn't that last about 1,000 years? Not a 1,000 year cycle?
Yeah, I think it lasts at least 1,000 years.
Yeah.
But then after the 1,000 years is over, he will be loosed for a little season. Now, what's interesting about this, it does not say the dragon or the serpent was destroyed, but just imprisoned. Why must he be loosed?
To test the righteous, probably.
Okay, so the teaching will go abroad and start to permeate society. That, just because some outer authority says something's true, that doesn't make it true. You have to verify it by by running it by your own inner consciousness, your own inner soul. And this is a teaching that will begin to spread throughout the planet, and it will put a seal on the Antichrist energy so that they will not have power to prevail. Okay. Yet, after 1,000 years has passed, there's going to be another problem surfacing, which we're going to talk about next week. And that problem is illusion. So that even though it will be a prevalent teaching that you must look within, people will look within and still not see correctly, because looking within, you have your lower and higher self. And so people will begin to trust their lower self over the higher self and be caught in illusion. And that illusion will surface stronger and stronger. And after the 1,000 years, illusion will become very powerful. They'll still believe, yeah, I've verified stuff with them, but they will not get the right verification. And so this will create a problem after the 1,000 years of peace. And we'll talk about that next week. Until then, any questions or comments before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, people will think they've overcome the influences of the ego, but then when it's loosed a little bit, then they'll be tested and tried, and only those that have really overcome it will rise to the top, I think.
Right. After the lower emotions are controlled and after the teaching prevails that, you got to verify things within, this will bring peace on earth for 1,000 years, this suppression of this control of the release of the lower emotions. And but then the next problem will be illusion. People interpreting what they get from within incorrectly, and people contacting the emotional self with the soul. you look within, there's the emotional self, the feeling self, and then there's the soul. We must look beyond the emotions, the lower emotions, to the soul itself. And this will create the final division that will prevent a permanent peace on earth. And we'll talk about that next week. We're getting near the end of the book finally, to the consummation. So until then, we will look forward to discussing that.
Well, I
And
think
it's been said that the higher you go in consciousness, the greater the tests. So there'll never be a place where you're not tested.
Yeah, well, one cycle is in. Once one cycle is in, then we'll go into another cycle, and then we'll have new problems to deal with. So basically, the Book of Revelations kind of covers this cycle of like 7,000 years altogether, and then there'll be another one to come.
a new cycle, of
Yeah,
seven.
new problems, but always have some problem to deal with.
Well,
So,
I think you've done a masterful job in presenting who and what the beast is and the teachers of the beast and the role that the disciples will have to play in sealing the door where evil dwells. I think you've done a really excellent job there, Mr. Dewey, in
well, we
presenting that.
posted this on YouTube, and one guy commented a while back that this was the most enlightened stuff he'd come across, and he wondered why more people weren't accessing it. Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the things out there on the Book of Revelation gets a lot of hits, and when you look into it, it's just kind of mediocre stuff. But it's
You don't see it as the path of the disciple. They see it as world events and world affairs and world Armageddon and all of it's outside.
yeah, a lot of times you'll see people presenting something like, yeah, the situation we're having, this bad weather and all this or whatever, or this war, it's all prophesied in the Book of Revelation. And then you look at it, it's really a stretch to say that's from the Book of Revelation. But it gets a lot of hits, you know. Okay, my friends, we will look forward to ought to be pretty